and let's get started. So I want to give the brief disclaimer that the title of this is ever so slightly misleading. We will talk a little bit about how to like simplify your part so that you can play those complicated stuffs and keep track and keep up with the group when the tempo is really going fast. Because raise your hand if you're somebody who's been in an ensemble rehearsal and the conductor starts playing and you're like, wait, I really have to play that fast right now? I've definitely experienced that for sure. So we will talk a little bit about how to actually simplify the music in those moments. But I think even better, we're going to talk about how to actually learn those fast notes so that you can really get them down. So I saw some of you raising your hands already, and it sounds like you're familiar with this idea that I call fast finger freakout. So if you were in a rehearsal and we pulled up something like this and I said the tempo is 144 beats per minute, ready, go, good luck, you'd probably think something like, whoa, that's fast notes, sextuplet, accidentals, all kinds of crazy stuff happening. And then as you play it, you probably do a little bit of the like wiggle your fingers and like kind of pray and just hope that you end up at the downbeat and land there with everybody. And then at the end of it, you're kind of left thinking, was that right? I was freaking out and trying to keep up as best as I could, but I don't actually know if I really did it correctly or not. And that's where this stuff can become really frustrating in practice, and you can spend a lot of time doing repetition after repetition after repetition and kind of going nowhere with it. So that's what I'm going to sort of hopefully help you with today, is to figure out how to actually get this stuff down and how to approach it in a way that makes it actually playable. But first, we need to talk about the consequences of when you have that fast finger freakout. One is muddy ensemble precision. If you have a whole section of clarinetists or a whole ensemble of the whole band freaking out trying to keep up, the timing isn't going to be accurate at all. The practice is going to be very frustrating, like I just mentioned, because you don't know if you're doing it right and you're just doing the reps and not getting better. Your execution is going to be very inconsistent. We've probably all had that where you do some of the fast stuff and you're like, whoa, I actually got it. That was fun and exciting. And then the next time it doesn't happen. So you're like, well, I got it once before, so probably if I just like keep doing it, then I'll start getting it more. And I think that's the way most of us practice, and most of us kind of get there over time, but it's still always inconsistent. And the last place you want inconsistency is when you have the one chance to get it right in the performance. So practicing in a way that's more consistent will be super valuable. And then the last consequence of fast finger freakout, which I think is the most noticeable and relatable, is that you end up getting lost. And the reason why you get lost in your band music and in rehearsals is not actually because you're falling behind. It's because you think that you can't play that fast. So then you try to play as fast as you can. And whenever we're playing as fast as we can and we're sort of freaking out about going as fast as you can, you're almost always going to get ahead. And the reason why you're getting ahead is because you're rushing and you're skipping notes and you're trying to play as fast as possible. And then you get ahead, but you think, oh, it's so fast, and you hear all these fast notes around you, so you think you're getting behind, and then you get more and more ahead, and the next thing you know, you're completely lost. Which hopefully it doesn't happen to you too regularly, but I bet this happens a lot of times at the first rehearsal. I had a conductor who would, every first rehearsal, it would be a full at-tempo run-through of the whole program to show us like how it's going to go, what it's going to be like. And those are the rehearsals where it's really easy to get lost because you feel like you're falling behind, but you're actually rushing ahead. So I do want to talk about how to actually simplify the music, because that's a really useful tool when it comes to the performance potentially, or sort of as you're learning and as you're in the rehearsal process. So go ahead and type in the chat. I'll actually stop sharing so it's easier to see where the chat is for you all. And I want you to type, if you were looking at that scary run that we were looking at in the beginning, type a 1 in the chat if you're like, there's no way I could ever play that at 144 beats per minute. Type a 2 in the chat if you're like, I could probably get that, but it would take some practice and take some work and it wouldn't happen the first try for sure. And type a 3 in the chat if you're like, yeah, probably 1 practice session, maybe 2 practice sessions, and I should be able to get that down. So we have Susan, Robert 1, Alexander 1 to 2, Monica 1, Carmen 2, Tamara 3, awesome Tamara. A bunch of 2s coming in, perfect. This is perfect if you're at the sort of 1 to 2 part. If you're at the 3 and you feel like you could do this in just a few practice sessions, that's awesome. The stuff about how to learn the fast notes will still be super helpful. The simplifying part is very important when you're at that point where it's like, I definitely could do this, but it's going to take some work. So what we want to do to simplify is kind of start with the most simple version. Sometimes we might think, oh, I just need to leave like 1 note out or 2 notes out to simplify. But actually, I think you're going to be better off if you just really go for the beats. And that's why I think for this whole presentation, if I had just made a presentation about like how to simplify your music, I don't think it would have been very interesting. But when you're getting started, especially in those early rehearsals, aim for just the beats is our first simplification. So that's what this would look like if we just sort of took everything else out, and you could even take out the pickups entirely. So now you just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. The really important part about this, if you're playing it this way, and you can absolutely do this in rehearsals. I conduct a community band sometimes, and I would absolutely prefer people to play this rather than just sort of mushing through it. And the reason why it's so helpful to do that is because you're actually connecting to the beat and you're keeping up with the steady beat. That's why this training or this idea was originally for my rhythm course, even though it's talking about fast notes. I think the secret to getting the fast notes is truly in getting the rhythm really steady, which we'll be talking about more. But for our sort of very basic starting simplification, literally just play the downbeats. The very important part about this, and actually I'll demonstrate this on the sextuplet, is to still make sure that you're playing very short and playing the note value that's written. So if you notice when I demonstrated it, the 16th note on beat 1, 16th note on beat 2, those were very short notes. The quarter note could be a full value quarter note. And then the sextuplet especially is very short. Because if I hold that long and do, there'll be other people doing, and if I'm holding the A throughout that, then it's going to create like a weird harmony that wasn't actually intended. So make sure that you're really still true to the note values as far as how long you're holding them, but just playing just the beats. Something like that. And this will actually set the foundation for being able to play all of the notes because we're hitting every beat and we're staying connected to the beat. And this is going to prevent us from freaking out and getting ahead because we're seeing each beat, we're landing at each beat and staying in control. As we continue sort of building this up and as we get more practice with it, the next thing that you can add in would be the ands of the beats. So maybe and 1 and 2 and 2 and 3, and then even on the sextuplet as well, 4 and 1, still with the proper short note values. So that would go something like this: 1, 2, 3. Something like that for simplifying it. Beyond that, I think that's about all you should ever do simplifying. You could get more creative and say like, I'm going to do these 16th note pickups, ba-da-dum, ba-da-dum-bum, and then leave this out, and then maybe I can play that whole beat, and then this is just a scale, so maybe I could do that and do something like that to continue simplifying and continue building it up. But I think once you get to that point, you might as well just be playing all of the notes and you'll be better off playing all of the notes. And I will say too that personally, even on the fast stuff, I very, very rarely actually change the part that I'm playing. it's great in early rehearsals and as we're learning, but I think just hitting the individual beats is by far the easiest way to simplify. So that's how to actually change your part and adapt your part as needed. And again, if you're at a 3 on this, where you feel like you could get it in a couple practice sessions, then hopefully you get the music in advance of the rehearsal, you practice it in advance of the rehearsal, and you can be playing the whole thing from the first rehearsal. If you were at a 2, then maybe you simplify for the first few rehearsals, and then as you do all the practice that we're about to talk about, you're able to build it up and really get it. And then if you're at the 1, maybe you simplify it and keep it simplified all the way through the performance. Again, if you're playing in a community ensemble, a high school ensemble, something that's not a professional group, I don't think there's anything wrong with simplifying like this. Professionals, unfortunately, we are expected to actually know it and play it and do all the notes. But absolutely acceptable to even do in the performance the just on the beat simplification, especially if that actually helps you to have more accurate timing and playing with everybody. So that's simplifying. Now let's talk about how to actually practice it so that you could actually play all of these notes really comfortably and confidently. And to keep the alliteration going, I call this fast finger fortitude as opposed to fast finger freak out. So we want to be able to hit these notes and feel in control and really feel like we nailed it at the end of the day. And the way to do that is by noticing the rhythm groupings, noticing the note groupings, and having a really good practice plan. So let's actually start with the practice plan for how we're going to tackle this. So I think there's a lot of mistakes that really commonly get made as we're practicing fast notes, and there's some slightly unintuitive correct ways to do it. So the first wrong thing that we do is this idea of sort of getting the notes under our fingers. So we would look at this music and think, oh, there's some accidentals in there, I'm not like recognizing these notes right off the bat, and we practice it something like this. We're just getting the notes under our fingers. But I think that's a silly idea because you already know the notes. If you know how to play your chromatic scale, then you know all of the notes on the instrument. You don't have to get any notes under your fingers. Yes, it is a unique order, but I think it's going to be so much better to, instead of just getting the notes under your fingers, to actually just do it rhythmically right from the start and do it really steadily. You're not going to be able to go at 144 beats per minute or whatever right away, but go slow enough that you can actually do it steadily and confidently, because when we're learning a piece of music, we're not learning the notes. We do our scales to learn the notes. When we're learning a piece of music, we're learning how the notes go in the right order with the right timing. And that timing part is the key to really getting this fast stuff down. Because remember, the root of fast note freakout and fast finger freakout is that you're trying to go fast, you're trying to keep up, and you end up getting ahead and losing track of the rhythm. So the antidote to that is always, always, always keeping track of the rhythm. Even from the very first time you play it, I would suggest doing it with the metronome, slow enough that you can do it steadily and confident and in control. Speaking of the metronome, that's another wrong thing that we do is we see, okay, the metronome marking is 144 beats per minute. I'm going to set my metronome to 144 beats per minute and hope that I'm able to keep up, using the metronome not to drag and to get up to tempo. Instead, we want to use the metronome not to rush. What I mean by that is when we play something like this, we're going to get going in the 16th notes, and then even if we're thinking about playing steadily, something like this might happen. And it was very subtle. You may not have even noticed it, but I didn't hold this quarter note long enough. This is the number one most common mistake that I see people making, is that they slow down on the hard stuff and they speed up on the easy stuff. And then the more they speed up on the easy stuff, the slower it sounds like you're getting when you slow down for the hard stuff. So the real purpose of the metronome is to set it really, really slow. Let me get my metronome pulled up here. Really slow. Even if this tempo said 144 is the goal tempo, I might start at 60. that feels comfortable. The quarter note was long enough because the metronome was keeping me from rushing through the quarter note. And then the last kind of misconception we get is it just takes reps, 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 reps. If we do it enough, then eventually we'll be able to do it fast. And I don't think that's the case at all. How many times have you practiced something like 1,000,000 reps and it still didn't go well at tempo? Yep. Yeah, it's so easy to do. So instead of just doing reps, as we're doing our slow repetitions especially, we need to let that awareness expand, really get good quality of finger motion, good quality of rhythm evenness, all of that stuff that's going to allow us to go faster. So that's the practice plan. A little bit of the neuroscience behind that I think is very interesting is that all of this practicing, the whole purpose of practicing is for us to basically program the subconscious. There's this idea of muscle memory, and I bet we've all also experienced that, where you've practiced something so much that you can not even think about it and your fingers kind of just do it. Muscle memory is a bit of a misnomer because there's not actually any memory in our muscles that are wiggling the fingers, but there is memory in our subconscious part of the brain back here in the cerebellum that knows what we're doing there, and it's through repetitions that we program that in. One of my things that I say in lessons all the time is to remember that our brains just get good at doing what we do. If you've ever mislearned an accidental where you played something as like an F instead of an F sharp, you've gotten really good at playing that F, and then playing the F sharp feels weird and sounds weird, and it takes a while to sort of relearn that new note because our brain just gets good at doing what we do. And the neuroscience behind that is this idea of myelination. So whenever we move a finger, we're firing a neuron that's going through the muscles and telling that finger to fire. And as neurons fire, they eventually will myelinate. And what myelin is, this myelin sheath, is basically an insulation around that electrical circuit in our brain. And that insulation allows it to fire more quickly because there's less interference from the things happening around it. The only way that we can build up the myelin sheath is by doing it. And that's why the brain gets good at doing whatever it's doing. And that's also why it's super important to always use a conscious filter as we're practicing. The subconscious doesn't know if it should be F natural or F sharp. It just knows what you're playing. So we need that conscious mind to be really clear about how we want the music to go so that we're always programming in the right information and not myelinating the wrong note or the tense finger motion or too much finger motion. That's another thing that will often hold back our speed. The last thing about sort of the neuroscience of it is that it takes time, it takes sleep, and you need nutrition. The myelin is mostly made up of actually like fat and cholesterol, so we need those nutrients in there to build up the brain actually, but not too much because it's bad for the heart, but good for the brain. So that's sort of the neuroscience behind it. So what does actually good fast note practice look like? Hopefully you're already having an idea of it, but honestly, it's really slow. It's slow practice. I heard somebody just recently talking about Anthony McGill was doing some kind of presentation, and somebody asked him how he plays all the fast notes, and he says he practices them really, really slow. And I think if you ask any professional, it's all about the slow practice, but also good quality of the slow practice. So I sort of broke up a fast note practice plan that's broken up into 3 stages. It's preparation, the actual practice of it, and the performance of it. So starting off with preparation, we want to make sure that we actually listen to it and we have an idea of the end goal. We want to have a bit of rhythm groupings in mind and some rhythm analysis. Also some note groupings and some fingering analysis is great. And then if we can audiate it, is sort of golden. Audiation is visualization, but for audio rather than visuals. And when it comes to audiation, we want to be using that to get our clear picture of what we're going for. If you take some time just looking at the music, audiating through it, then you'll probably notice all of those accidentals and the key signature and make sure that you're actually playing the right notes rather than learning the F natural instead of the F sharp or whatever it may be. So let's look at what that would look like on an actual passage like this. It was actually fitting. I didn't plan this, but the fact that I was saying F natural instead of F sharp applies in this, because as we're looking through the note patterns, if we look here at the end of the measure, we start on G, we go to G, so it seems like maybe a G scale because we play all the notes in between. If there's a G major scale, then it would have an F sharp in it. This looks like an F natural, but actually, if we look back earlier in the measure, there is an F sharp carrying through. So this is in fact a G major scale, and this is actually a perfect example where it would be very easy to mistake that F sharp as an F natural. So that's part of note analysis. Other note analysis that we might look at in this is try to explain the accidentals. And this is a great way whenever you're looking at learning notes and trying to do a little bit of analysis of what's actually going on with the notes here and preparing the music. Look for accidentals and ask yourself, why is that accidental there? This C natural is there and this F sharp is there to make this a G major scale. If we look at these accidentals, we have G, A sharp to B. So maybe this is kind of just a passing tone would be the fancy music theory term, where we're sort of passing from G to B. But then why is it an A sharp and not an A natural? Because then we could just have a G major scale. I'm not sure yet. Let's keep looking. Next note is C sharp, B, C sharp, D. Oh, it's also like a passing tone. That's kind of interesting. And then D, F sharp, G. Also kind of a passing tone, not quite stepwise in this case, so that's a little interesting and weird. But we do seem to have this recurring pattern that it's a natural note, sharp, natural, sharp, natural, sharp. That's kind of interesting. And if I actually look at the interval between the sharp to the next note, A sharp to B is a half step, C sharp to D, half step, F sharp to G, half step. Now I have some context for sort of what those accidentals are doing. And every time we get more context for what's going on, it gives our brain another way to think about it and gives us sort of another angle and another layer so that we actually learn the information a little bit more deeply and a little bit more quickly. So it's kind of ironic, even though this preparation takes time to do, it's actually going to yield much faster results than just reps, 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 reps. So looking at this, we now understand what these accidentals are doing. They're sort of half-step leading tones to B, to D, to G. And we can take that even one step further. Actually, let's do it a different way first, because I think this might be the more intuitive way. Looking at the next notes, we have G, D, B, D, G. So we have repetition of D's, repetition of G, and even though we're playing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notes, we're only playing actually 3 different pitches across that beat, and those 3 pitches make up a G major arpeggio. So we can see this as now, this is just a kind of G major arpeggio pattern. This is why practicing your scales and practicing your scale patterns are so helpful, because you can start to recognize these patterns in the actual music. So we have G major arpeggio. And now thinking back to these accidentals, we have G, A sharp leading to B, C sharp leading to D, F sharp leading to G. And if you take out those sharps, it's actually just G, B, D, G. So that's also just a G major arpeggio. And you might have noticed that if we did our simplification where you were just playing a beat at a time, where we have B, G, G, those are notes from the G major arpeggio. So that's another way that simplifying and starting with like just the notes on the beats, or even more so the 8th notes instead of all the 16th notes, starts to give you some more context for how the music's going, gives you some more things to anchor into. So that's note groupings. The other one that's significant is the rhythm groupings. So when it comes to rhythm groupings, almost always your rhythm will group to the beat. The notes between the beat will be upbeats leading to the beat. So in this case, we have and leading to 1, we have E and leading to 2, E and leading to 3. We start on 4, and then this one we can even break up into 8th notes. I always say there's the classic joke that musicians can't count past 4, which of course we can count past 4, but I actually think it's very true that if you ever find yourself counting past 4, there's probably an easier way to do it and probably a better grouping. So instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, we can do 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, and do a little bit smaller groupings there. But we're always looking for sort of those beat anchors. If you hate playing with the metronome, these are the things to look for. These are the things to be aiming for as you're playing. Having those beat anchors there is going to make it, again, so much easier to actually play it steadily, play it with the metronome, keep track of the beat, stay in control as you're playing with the ensemble, and all that good stuff. So we now have our note groupings, we have our rhythm groupings, we have an idea of where we're going. Along with the note groupings and sort of note patterns would also be fingerings. As you're thinking through the fingerings here, the only interesting one is maybe to do the forked fingering here, or the sliver key is how Jay had it marked in the warm-ups from earlier today. So sliver key B natural, because you're coming from the A sharp, would be easier than flip-flopping, but that's the only special fingering that we have there, but it's great to be aware of what those special fingerings might be. And then we audiate it, and that's the last step. And actually we kind of skipped the first step of listening to it, so I'll be your recording of this. This is just something that I just quickly put together. I might not be able to play it at 144 yet too, so we might go a little slower, but let's see. Okay, I think I can do this. So this is like effectively listening to the recording. So we're just getting an idea of how it goes. One more time. And I held the last quarter note a little bit long, but that's kind of the goal that we're aiming for. That's how it goes. And maybe you can audiate it at tempo, because when we're audiating, we're just hearing the sound in our head and not worried about all the baggage of the clarinet. So let's try just a couple times audiating through it. I think this is one of the most underdeveloped skill for most musicians, I think. This ability to like really have a clear idea of what we're going for is so helpful in so many aspects of our practice. So let's all give that a try, just thinking through it in your head. And that's probably a little fast even for audiating it. So if you're not feeling like you're fully comprehending it and feeling in control, then go slower. That's also a general all the time tip. If you ever feel like you're not in control in your practice, go slower. I'm gonna go significantly slower. Let's go down to 100. And again, audiating it. And just to double check your audiation, I'll play it and let's see how close what you were hearing is to how it actually goes. 1, 2, 3. One more time. 1, 2, 3. Give me a thumbs up if your audiation was really good. Thumbs down if it was not so good. Good. Some of both, kind of, sort of in between. Cool. Audiation is one of those things that really does take practice, and that's why I kind of wanted to really talk about it and really go through it so that you all have an idea of how this goes, because it's going to help you have clarity on what you're aiming for. So it'll be obvious when you're making mistakes, so then you can fix those mistakes, and it's a way of like being really clear what you want in your conscious mind so that you have that conscious filter as you're programming the subconscious, and there aren't any mistakes that get programmed in. So that's the preparation for practice. I will say too that you don't have to do this on like every single measure in the piece. Even those of you who were like at the 3 comfort level where you feel like you could get this down pretty quickly, you might not even have to go this in depth with it. Maybe it's just a matter of a few reps practicing it slowly, gradually speeding it up a little bit, and then you're good to go and you're done with it. And most of us will have that experience with most of our music there will just be a measure or two here and there that we have to go a little bit deeper in to really get up to tempo. So that's the preparation. Now for the actual practice, this is kind of your daily practice loop that can be really helpful in kind of the way that I would recommend doing this. So first we need to establish what our baseline speed is, and our baseline speed needs to be with the metronome, because the metronome is our tool to actually keep track of things and track our progress. So that baseline speed, half tempo is a great place to start. Going even slower than half tempo, absolutely no problem. The thing that we need is that it's actually steady, it's actually correct, and it's this 80+% comfortable and confident. So what I mean by that is that we are like really feeling good about this. 8 out of 10 times I would get it down. There might be a couple little things here and there occasionally, but like 80+% of the time I'm gonna have it correct, and I feel like I'm in control of making it go correct. The other thing about this baseline speed that people often make a mistake when practicing fast stuff is when they're going slow, they just sort of tune out and aren't focused on it, and they're like, oh, this is slow enough that it's easy, I don't have to think about it. We don't want to do that. We want to stay engaged with it. If it's slow enough that the notes are easy, perfect. That's right where we want to be. But allow that awareness to expand and think about, how am I moving my fingers then? What are the note patterns? What are the rhythm patterns? Is it a good sound? Am I cleanly moving between notes? I'll tell you too, I don't actually spend that much time like formally analyzing the note and rhythm patterns like I just demonstrated. Oftentimes I just notice those things as I'm playing it slowly, because I'm playing at a tempo that I'm not only having to focus on getting the notes out. The notes feel easy at that tempo. I can start thinking about other things. So that's your first thing, is establish that baseline, play it starting at the baseline every time you practice it. Then gradually speed up to your speed ceiling. You'll hit a ceiling where it's like no longer feeling comfortable and you feel like you're just wiggling. Note where that is, note where your baseline is. Then use practice techniques at around like 80% of the speed ceiling. It totally depends on what practice technique you're using. But what I mean by practice techniques are things that we've probably heard before that our teachers have told us to do, but we didn't understand why they actually made a difference. Things like practice rhythms or dotted rhythms, note grouping things, doing 1 E and a 2, 1 E and a 2, 1 E and a 2, working in small chunks, working from the end, going backwards, even playing it backwards. All of those kinds of practice techniques are fantastic and can be helpful if you know why they're helpful. And the reason why they're helpful is because it makes our brain engage with the notes better. If you find yourself rushing through notes, doing practice rhythms and dotted rhythms can be really helpful, because that really forces you to think about every single note as you're going through it. If you're having trouble keeping your fingers relaxed, or you don't even know if your fingers can possibly move fast enough between certain notes, I like to do the snappy fingers exercise, I call it, where you do just 2 notes as fast as you can with lots of space in between. So on this exercise, it would be something like this. So I have plenty of time to think about the note that I'm going to next, but I'm still moving my fingers really super duper fast. So do those practice techniques in a way that's comfortable, and that you're engaging your brain with the music and engaging your brain and building more layers of your understanding of the music. So there's more stuff back there that's myelinating. You're convincing your brain that you keep firing this in different ways and different patterns. So like, actually myelinate that. I actually want to learn this. I actually want to be able to do this fast. And you're always doing it correct, so it's in control. Over time, your ceiling will increase, but it takes time to actually let the stuff myelinate. And over time, your baseline can increase a little bit as well. But we want that baseline to always be the like super easy, relaxed, totally in control, really confident speed. So that's how to actually practice. And then in performance, we want to relax. We want to trust what we've done in preparation. You'll be so much more confident in the performance by doing your practicing this way, because you've been practicing rep after rep after rep after rep, but not how we normally do it, where we just rep it hoping that it's going to get better. You've been practicing rep after rep after rep of exactly the way that you want, totally in control, with the end goal of what you're aiming for in time or in mind. And then the next thing for the performance is lean into that steady beat aim for the beats, hit those beat anchors, and then you'll stay with the group. Play one grouping at a time. This is one of my favorite tricks. Don't think, oh my gosh, there's so many fast notes in this piece that I'm gonna have to play. Think, I'm just playing this one beat, and a 1, and a 1E and a 2, and just play from one beat to one beat. The way you climb a mountain is to not look at the top of the mountain and think, that's a lot of walking. It's to take one step at a time and keep moving forward. And with that in mind, stay in the moment. Don't be thinking behind to anything that you messed up. Don't be thinking ahead to anything that you're worried about. Just stay in the moment of one beat, one beat, one beat, and then everything will be great. I have a couple sort of secret fast note practice multipliers that I want to get in real quick. These are the things that are going to make the biggest difference in your fast note practice. One is time. And what I mean by this is just the passage of time. You can't get something up to tempo overnight, though there is the next one I think is a little bit about overnight. You can't get this stuff up to tempo overnight. You need to do the slow practice, stay in control, and that trust that over time of slow and control practice, it will come together and it will speed up over time. Overnight, sleeping can be very, very helpful. A lot of myelination and a lot of our brain learning happens while we're asleep, especially in our sleep phases that get longer towards the longer amount of time we sleep. So 7+ hours of sleep is really, really beneficial for learning and getting that stuff myelinated and encoded into the brain. The metronome is my favorite one because, again, it keeps us truly steady. And I think that's the best thing that our brain can do for actually learning this stuff, is doing it steadily in time. Because every time you do a repetition that's not precisely in time, you aren't actually learning the music. You're playing the notes in the right order, maybe approximately at the right timing, but it's truly doing it at the right timing that's going to carry over to speeding it up. The cool thing about our brain and the way it learns is, as long as the ratios are right, the actual tempo doesn't matter so much. So doing something slow with perfect evenness will translate faster, and our brain can actually speed that up very quickly. But if we're doing it slow, not evenly, and not with the precise rhythm, then our brain's learning that imprecise rhythm we're practicing, because our brain just gets good at doing whatever it's doing. And then the last little trick and thing to think about is keeping that mental focus up and that mental engagement. As you're doing reps and reps and reps and reps, don't let it become just mindless, I'm just wiggling my fingers. Always stay engaged so that as much of your brain is engaged, firing, all those neural networks are going, because the more those neural networks fire and the more they sort of heat up, the more the brain is encouraged to myelinate them, and the more they will be able to go faster. And I did it. We have 30 seconds left. In summary, go slowly, steadily with the metronome, in control, relaxed, precise, all that stuff. The simplification we talked about at the beginning, do that as needed in your rehearsals, even in the performance if you need to. As far as simplification goes, I think just on the beat is the way to go. And then we don't have time for questions, but if you do have any questions, feel free to email me at quickstartclarinet@gmail.com. I also have a YouTube channel with over 500 videos about clarinet and music stuff, so you can always go on YouTube and search Quick Start Clarinet, whatever your question is, and there may be a video on it, and if there's not, send me an email and I can help you out. So I hope that this was helpful and interesting. Thanks so much for joining. I wish you all the best as you slowly practice all of your fast notes that you have coming up, simplifying as you need to. And I think we'll be kicked out in about 30 seconds.